The year is 2021. Biblical scholar Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou sits transfixed before a passage from Ezekiel that describes in explicit detail God's loins filling the temple. This isn't metaphor or allegory, but the raw, uncensored description of a deity with a physical body, arms, legs, face, and yes, even genitals. For years, mainstream religious authorities have dismissed these passages as mere figures of speech. But what if they weren't? This explosive question forms the core of Stavrakopoulou's groundbreaking work, God and Anatomy. And what she uncovers shatters centuries of theological assumption. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was originally understood to have a literal, physical form. Just like the pagan deities Judaism and Christianity would later define itself against. Ancient text conjured a startlingly corporeal image of God. Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou says, the implications are staggering. The foundation of Western monotheism, the radical break with paganism that supposedly defined early Judaism and later Christianity, may be built on a fundamental misunderstanding. Exploring the real God of the Bible with groundbreaking scholars like Francesca Stavrakopoulou demands visuals as bold as the ideas we discuss here on MythVision. But trust me, filming doesn't always go as planned. I've had plenty of shoots interrupted by bad weather, noisy neighbors, or unexpected technical issues. Thankfully, Storyblocks has come to the rescue more times than I can count. Storyblocks gives me unlimited downloads of all kinds of high-quality media, all for one predictable subscription cost. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, I've had subscriptions with many others, and often they have limitations or token systems. They usually hit a cap or you gotta spend a lot more money, but not with Storyblocks. You literally get unlimited access. I have everything I need in one place. Stunning 4K and HD videos in case you need a smaller or larger video size, music, which never gives me a problem on YouTube for monetization, and that can be a headache, sound effects, images, and easy-to-use templates to speed up my editing in Premiere Pro. It genuinely streamlines my workflow and boosts the production value of every video. You know my most viral videos on MythVision, like the one documentary I did on Enoch, or on Genesis, or Adam and Eve? Look, they have millions of views. Literally all of them were crafted using Storyblocks. The quality of this site contributed to the success of my viral videos. I swear this is the best site for putting together videos. I know because I've tried most of them. And here's my favorite part. Storyblocks content is always fresh, frequently updated and curated to represent diverse perspectives and cultures. Their clear-cut licensing keeps my channel protected so I can focus entirely on creating, not worrying about copyright. Trust me, that can be a headache. So whether you're a creator like me or running a creative business that you want to craft quality videos, Storyblocks is a total game changer. In fact, if I were to start a channel today, and I've started several recently, from scratch, for whatever reason, I would use Storyblocks to get started. In fact, that's actually what I'm doing as we speak. To start your unlimited download journey today, head to storyblocks.com/MythVision, or simply click the link in the description below. Trust me, your creativity and your audience will thank you. The distinction between the spiritual God of the Bible and the physical gods of surrounding cultures, a distinction that has shaped Western civilization for millennia, might be nothing more than a theological sleight of hand performed centuries after these texts were written. The biblical text overflows with physical descriptions of God that were never intended as metaphors by their original audience. When Moses encounters God at the burning bush, God speaks. When God creates the world, Genesis says God sees that it is good. When Adam and Eve hide in the garden, Scripture describes God walking among the trees in the cool of the day. These aren't metaphorical descriptions, they reflect the understanding of ancient Israelites who conceived of their deity as having specific physical capabilities. The evidence appears throughout Scripture. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Numbers 6:25-26. In Exodus 33:11, Moses speaks with God face to face as one speaks to a friend. Not a spiritual metaphor, but a physical encounter between two beings with faces. Divine arms stretch out in power. With a mighty hand and outstretched arm, his love endures forever. Psalm 136:12. This imagery directly parallels the Canaanite storm god Baal, who wielded a lightning bolt in his outstretched arm. God's hands create and destroy. Your hands made me and formed me. Give me understanding to learn your commands. Psalm 119:73. Just as the Babylonian creator god Marduk used his hands to fashion humanity. Genesis 2:7 tells us Yahweh formed man from the dust of the ground with divine hands. God's feet stand upon physical ground. Heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Isaiah 66:1. These aren't isolated descriptions, but consistent characterizations throughout the Hebrew Bible, understood as literal attributes of a deity who, while greater than humans, nevertheless shared their physical form. Image of God, anybody? Perhaps the most startling archaeological evidence for the embodied biblical God comes from the Ain Dara temple in northern Syria. Here, massive footprints, 3 feet long, are carved into stone, thresholds making the physical path of a deity entering its sanctuary. These Iron Age carvings dating to 1200 and 900 BCE provide a stunning parallel to biblical descriptions of Yahweh's feet in the Jerusalem temple. In Isaiah 60:13, God describes the temple as the place of my sanctuary, and I will glorify where my feet rest. Even more explicitly, Ezekiel 43:7 envisions the restored temple as the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet. The footprints at Ain Dara aren't an anomaly. They're evidence of a widespread theological worldview that the biblical authors participated in rather than rejected. When Israelites spoke of God's feet in the temple, they were expressing the same understanding of divine embodiment that their neighbors portrayed in stone. The physical God of the Bible wasn't an anomaly in the ancient world. It was actually the norm. Throughout the ancient Near East, from Egypt to Mesopotamia, gods were imagined with bodies. Look at the gods surrounding ancient Israel and their striking parallels to Yahweh. The Canaanite high god El, depicted with a bearded face and bull horns, mirrors the biblical God who speaks face to face with Moses. When the Bible mentions God's face, Panim, it draws on the same visual imagery as El's statues from Ugarit. The Egyptian falcon-headed Horus, who sees all with his divine eye, just as Yahweh's eyes range throughout the earth in Zechariah 4:10. In Psalm 11:4, we read that God's eyes behold, his eyelids test the children of men, language that parallels Egyptian descriptions of Horus's all-seeing vision. Even more shocking is the evidence that Yahweh wasn't originally understood as the supreme creator God, but as one deity among many, specifically as a son of El. In Deuteronomy 32:8-9, an ancient fragment reads, "When the Most High, El and a title of El, divided the nations, he mixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. For Yahweh's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance." This text doesn't present Yahweh as the creator of all nations, but as one of El's divine sons assigned Israel as his territorial inheritance, a family structure that perfectly mirrors Canaanite mythology, where El fathers gods including Baal, Yam, and Mot. Similarly, Psalm 82 shows Yahweh in the divine council condemning other gods, Elohim, calling them the sons of the Most High, language that places him within a divine family tree rather than as a solitary transcendent being. These aren't coincidences, but evidence of a shared theological worldview where divinity was understood through embodiment and familial relationships, not abstraction. Israel didn't reject this worldview. They participated in it. The God of the Bible didn't just have a body, he used it to engage with the world through divine senses that parallel human ones. In Genesis 8:21, God smelled the pleasing aroma of Noah's sacrifice, an explicit reference to sensory perceptions through the nose. This wasn't a quaint anthropomorphism, but reflected the belief that deities literally experienced sensory pleasure from sacrifices, just as Egyptian gods were believed to inhale incense smoke during temple rituals. Even more intimate is the account in Exodus 24:11, where the elders of Israel beheld God and ate and drank in his presence, a ritual meal resembling Mesopotamian kispu offerings, where gods consumed food laid before their statues. This wasn't symbolic communion, but shared physical experience between divine and human bodies. God's ears hear prayers and cries for help. He sees human suffering and joy. He tastes the offerings presented to him. He touches creation, molding humans from dust with divine hands. These sensory capabilities weren't superficial human projections, but essential aspects of how ancient people understood divine engagement with the world. The Bible occasionally references divine emotions and physical reactions. God's nostrils flare in anger, Exodus 15:8. God's heart grieves, Genesis 6:6. God rests and is refreshed, Exodus 31:17. These aren't the attributes of an abstract force or principle, but of a being with a body capable of emotional and physical response. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of Stavrakopoulou's research concerns divine sexuality. In Ezekiel's vision, Ezekiel 1:27, the prophet describes seeing God's loins surrounded by fire, language that Stavrakopoulou interprets as a reference to divine genitalia. The interpretation aligns with Ugaritic texts describing El's sexual union with the goddess Asherah and Egyptian reliefs depicting Amun-Re's phallus as a symbol of creative power. Divine sexuality wasn't hidden or shameful in the ancient world, but celebrated as the source of creation's fertility. More shocking still is Stavrakopoulou's analysis of the temple's inner chamber, debir, which she suggests functions as a metaphor for divine genitalia. This interpretation makes sense of otherwise puzzling temple imagery and ritual practices, placing biblical religion firmly within the context of the ancient Near Eastern fertility cults rather than apart from them. Yahweh's corporeal physicality, which is often evident in text from the Hebrew Bible, is incrementally erased over time as the texts are sanitized and replaced with notions of immateriality, says Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou. How did we lose this original understanding? How did the embodied Yahweh transform into the disembodied force that modern theologians describe? The answer lies in centuries of theological evolution, driven by philosophical concerns about divine limitation and perfection. As Hellenistic ideas infiltrated Jewish and later Christian thought, the notion of a God with body parts began to seem primitive and limiting. Divine transcendence required immateriality. This transformation was neither immediate nor uncontested. Traces of the original corporeal understanding remained, creating tensions within the texts that persist to this day. Early rabbinical writings reveal struggles to reconcile explicit bodily descriptions with emerging notions of divine incorporeality. Church fathers like Origen developed elaborate systems of allegorical interpretation to spiritualize troublesome physical descriptions. Even Islam has this issue. What we witness then is not the revelation of an eternally incorporeal deity, but a theological makeover, the gradual disembodiment of a God who was originally conceived in thoroughly physical terms. You can see that this process exposes how patriarchal religious systems suppressed Yahweh's physical portrayal by later spiritualizing his presence. What does it mean to rediscover the embodied God of the Bible? How does it reshape our understanding of religious history and theology? For scholars like Francesca Stavrakopoulou, it means recognizing that the supposed divide between monotheism and polytheism between spiritual and physical conceptions of divinity has been greatly exaggerated. The God of the Bible emerged not in radical opposition to surrounding cultures, but in conversation with them, sharing fundamental assumptions about divine embodiment while developing distinctive attributes and relationships. This evidence exposes a striking double standard in religious interpretation. When modern believers encounter biblical texts describing God's hands, eyes, or feet, they're quick to declare these obvious metaphors. Yet, when identical language appears in Canaanite or Egyptian religious texts, scholars and theologians have traditionally labeled these as primitive or literal conceptions of deity. The intellectual inconsistency is glaring. If Yahweh's physical descriptions are metaphorical, then we must apply the same interpretive framework to El, Baal, Horus, and Marduk. As the evidence reveals, either all these ancient gods were understood as having literal bodies, or none were. And the archaeological and textual evidence overwhelmingly suggests the former. These were embodied deities whose physicality was central to how they were worshipped and understood. For believers, this presents both challenge and opportunity. Challenge because it undermines comfortable distinctions between our spiritual God and their physical idols. Opportunity because it recovers a more authentic understanding of the text that had been sanitized through centuries of interpretation. Maybe they should check out the Mormons. Perhaps most importantly, it invites us to reconsider how we relate to the divine. If God was originally understood as having a body, with all the vulnerability, limitation, and particularity that embodiment entails, what does that mean for how we conceive our own bodies and their spiritual significance? In a world increasingly dominated by digital disembodiment and virtual abstraction, could the recovery of divine physicality offer a corrective? Could it remind us that spirituality isn't about escaping the body, but embracing it with all its messiness and materiality? Many scholars have praised Stavrakopoulou for restoring Yahweh's humanized identity within the ancient pantheon. Challenging later monotheistic abstractions, we're left to wonder, how much of what we consider timeless religious truth is actually the product of later theological revision? The pictures we humans draw of the divine dictate not just the way gods are conceptualized, but also how we imagine our own place in the world and how we treat each other, says Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou. Is the God you worship the real God of the Bible, or a philosophical abstraction created centuries later? Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, support us on the Patreon, and also consider taking one of our scholarly courses at mvp-courses.com. Thank you.